Let's talk about corruption. Not the street level stuff. Not the slip a guy some cash corruption. Not the my cousin knows a guy kind. We're talking about a system where $9 billion vanished. Billion with a B. In one state. Over 6 years. From programs designed to feed hungry kids and help autistic children. And you know the weirdest part? Everyone is shocked. On December 26th, a 23-year-old YouTuber named Nick Shirley posted a video, 42 minutes long. He and a middle-aged guy named David went to 9 daycares in Minneapolis, knocked on doors, filmed empty buildings, no kids, not even furniture. The claim? These places got millions in taxpayer money, no kids inside. One daycare, 1.9 million in 2025 alone. Another, 4 million total. The sign out front, misspelled learning. Quality Learning Center. That video now has 131 million views. Vice President Vance shared it. Elon Musk shared it. FBI Director Kash Patel said the Bureau was already investigating. So here is my first question. If this was so obvious a YouTuber found it in one afternoon, where was everyone else? I'll be honest with you. The story doesn't shock me. Not because it's acceptable, but because I've seen this pattern before. I was born and raised in a place where corruption wasn't a scandal. It was a background noise. I've learned early how systems actually work versus how they're described on paper. So when people ask, how could this happen, my reaction isn't outrage. It's recognition. What surprises me isn't that fraud exists. It's that people still believe it can't. 8 days before Shirley's video, federal prosecutors stood in Minneapolis and said something wild. First Assistant U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson, December 18th, 2024. He said half, maybe more, of $18 billion spent in 14 Minnesota programs since 2018 was stolen. Not wasted, not mismanaged, stolen. We're not talking about some petty cash theft from a 24/7 store like $100 or even a couple of $1,000. That's $9 billion. Gone. Autism therapy for kids who never got therapy. Housing assistance for people who never got any housing. Food for children who never got any food. Thompson called it industrial-scale fraud. He said every day investigators look under a rock and find a new 50 million fraud scheme. Every day. So the second question is, if prosecutors knew this in December, why did it take a YouTuber to make it national news? Let's talk about CCAP, the Child Care Assistance Program. Low-income families apply. The state approves them. They pick a daycare. The child care bills the county. The county pays the daycare directly. Simple, right? Here's the thing. The daycare reports its own attendance. No one verifies. No real-time checks. Just a form that says, I had 50 kids today, and the state writes a check. Minnesota does annual inspections, once per year. Announced or unannounced. Inspectors check 400 safety items. Fire exits, clean floors, staff ratios, the usual. But here's what they don't check. Whether the kids on the attendance sheet actually exist. So my third question is, if you design a system where people grade their own homework and no one checks the answers, what do you think is going to happen? After Shirley's video went viral, Minnesota officials moved fast. Within days, state inspectors visited all 9 daycares. Not the usual annual inspections, emergency visits. The results? 8 daycares had children present. 1 hadn't opened for the day yet. Minnesota Department of Children, Youth and Families issued a statement. We found children at 8 locations. The 9th was not yet open when we arrived. State officials held press conferences. The message? This video is misleading. The daycares are operating. This is a targeted attack on the Somali community. Governor Walz called it anti-immigrant hysteria. But here is what the state never addressed. Were those kids the same kids on the billing records? Did their parents actually qualify for CCAP? Were the attendance numbers accurate? The state proved people showed up. They didn't prove the billing was honest. One of the daycares in Shirley's video, Quality Learning Center, the one with the misspelled learning, received $1.9 million in 2025. It's now permanently closed. State records show it was cited multiple times for violations, including having no records for over a dozen listed children. No records. But $1.9 million in payments. The state found that violation in June, 6 months before Shirley showed up. The money kept flowing. So my fourth question is, if the state knew there were no records for enrolled children, why was that daycare still getting paid and the money was still flowing? This channel isn't about breaking news. It's about seeing what repeats. If that's your thing, you know what to do. Now let's talk about what happened when legacy media showed up. CNN sent a crew to Minnesota. They didn't investigate the daycares. They investigated Nick Shirley himself. Outside one of the facilities, a CNN reporter confronted him on camera. How do you know that all the allegations you are making are true? Shirley, we showed you what was happening. You can make your own analysis. Reporter, are you 100% sure? Shirley, yeah, I'm 100% sure. Then CNN did something interesting. They filmed children being dropped off at the same daycare Shirley had called empty. The story became, Shirley lied. Kids were there. This is anti-Somali propaganda. But here is what CNN never asked. How many kids are actually enrolled versus capacity? Can we see the attendance records? How much funding does this center receive? Why was it connected to feeding our future? They treated kids showed up today as proof of innocence. No one asked if those kids matched the billing. No one asked if 10 kids were enrolled but 99 were being billed. CNN ran a fact check. Disputed claims, unverified allegations, locked doors don't prove fraud, which is technically true. But federal prosecutors weren't saying locked doors prove fraud. They were saying $9 billion is missing. So my fifth question is, when journalism becomes defend the institution, discredit the outsider, who is journalism actually really serving? Let's be clear about one thing that happened. A conservative influencer posts a viral video, gets over 100 million views. Vice President shares it. FBI director confirms investigations were already underway. The media response? Skepticism. Fact checks, unverified claims, disputed allegations, which is fine. That's journalism. Verify before you amplify. But here's the thing. Federal prosecutors had already announced $18 billion in potential fraud 8 days before Shirley's video. That got barely any coverage. Where was the viral outrage? Where was national conversation? A YouTuber films empty buildings and suddenly everyone cares. But the caring is about whether the YouTuber is racist, not whether the fraud is real. Changing subjects, attacking the messenger, ignoring the evidence. That's called a diversion tactic. Sixth question, dear friends. When the response to where did 9 billion go is you're racist for asking, does that sound like transparency or cover up? Here is what makes this awkward. The same media institutions telling you to ignore Shirley are the same ones that missed the story for years. Feeding our future, 250 million stolen starting in 2020. When did national media cover it? 2022, after prosecution announced charges. The 18 billion estimate announced December 18th, 2024. When did it become national news? December 26th, after a YouTuber with camera showed up. So the pattern is, traditional media waits for official channels. Official channels move very slowly. By the time they move, billions are gone. Then an outsider shows up with a camera and asks uncomfortable questions. And the media's response is, don't trust him, trust us, we'll tell you what's real. Seventh question, dear friends. If your credibility depends on people not asking why you are late to every story, how do you maintain credibility? Here is where it gets really messy. Of the 92 people charged in fraud cases so far, 82 are Somali Americans. Minneapolis has the largest Somali population in the United States, about 84,000 people. Trump used this, called Somalis garbage, who contribute nothing, said they ripped off billions. He ended deportation protections for Somali immigrants and deployed 2,000 immigration agents to Minneapolis. Now critics say this is scapegoating, demonizing an entire community based on a few bad actors. But here's what nobody wants to say out loud. If 82 out of 92 defendants share the same background, then quoting Spy Kids movie, this is either an incredible coincidence or it's just an incredible coincidence. Or does it suggest something about network effects? Shared information, maybe? Cultural trust structures that got weaponized? And here's the part that makes people uncomfortable. When journalists defend communities by refusing to investigate patterns, who does that actually protect? So, my eighth question. If asking questions about fraud patterns is called racist, but ignoring those patterns lets fraud continue, who benefits from the silence? In 2019, Minnesota's Office for the Legislative Auditor investigated CCAP fraud. Found weak oversight, poor evidence quality. Prosecutors couldn't prove cases because the state didn't gather enough data. The report said, we can't tell you how much fraud there is. We didn't assess prevention, detection, or investigation properly. That was 2019. In 2024, a federal audit looked at 200 random CCAP payments, found problems everywhere. Minnesota created a fraud investigation team in 2013. Since 2020, they've recovered $2.4 million. Referred 5 cases per year for prosecution. 5 per year. While billions walked out the door. Governor Tim Walz said his administration has been cracking down for years. He appointed a director of program integrity last week. Ninth question, dear friends. If you've been cracking down for years and $9 billion still disappeared, were you cracking down or performing? Let's apply the Eagle's View framework to this fraud case. Tier 6, military force. Immigration raids, DHS agents deployed. This is the visible layer, fast, loud, unstable. Tier 5, demographic degradation. Not directly applicable here, but consider programs meant to help vulnerable population get looted. Services disappear, populations suffer without defense mechanisms triggering. Tier 4, economic power. This is where the fraud lives and thrives. Follow the money, 18 billion in federal funds. Minimal oversight. Perverse incentives. Growth just for the sake of growth. Tier 3, political framing. Waltz defends, Trump attacks. Everyone performs. Nobody fixes the system. Tier 2, culture. Network effects. Trust structures within communities. Maybe cultural norms around family loyalty made it harder to report fraud internally. Tier 1, conceptual worldview. Here's the real problem. The assumption that government programs must operate on trust. That verification is somehow cruel. That oversight is somehow oppression. If you believe checking attendance records is racist, you can't stop fraud. So my 10th question, dear friends, is what if the fraud was only possible because questioning it became forbidden? If you care more about patterns than panic, subscribe. Minnesota isn't unique. It's just visible. The Government Accountability Office estimated the US loses $233 billion to $521 billion per year to fraud. Every year. That's 3 to 7% of the entire federal budget. Medicaid alone, $543 billion in improper payments over the past decade. COVID relief programs were looted coast to coast. Minnesota became the example Americans finally noticed, but the systems that enabled it, those are everywhere. 11th question, if Minnesota is the example, how many states are we not noticing? Let's be brutally honest about incentives. For state employees, approving applications is easy. Denying them creates complaints, lawsuits, accusations of discrimination. Career risk is asymmetric. For federal government, more spending means bigger budgets next year. Cutting programs means admitting failure. For politicians, promising generous benefits wins votes. Demanding accountability sounds mean. For communities, if everyone knows someone getting benefits they shouldn't and no one reports it, why would you be the first? The system rewards looking the other way. So 12th question. When doing your job correctly gets you punished and doing it poorly gets you promoted, what behavior do you expect? Here's what nobody wants to admit. The system wasn't broken. It was built this way. Pay now, scrutinize later. That's official policy. Give people money first, ask questions later. Assume good faith. Trust the process. When prosecutors finally investigate, the money's gone. Overseas, laundered, converted to real estate. You can't recover it. Even when you convict, you get pennies on the dollar. 250 million stolen and feeding our future, 60 million recovered. That's 24%. That's 24 cents on the dollar. So 13th question, ladies and gentlemen. If you design a system where stealing is easy and recovery is nearly impossible, did you design a welfare program or a trap? So let's recap. A 23-year-old with a camera found something federal investigators knew about for years. His video gets 131 million views. The government scrambles. Minnesota loses 9 billion, maybe more. Prosecutors can't say for sure. Politicians blame each other. Communities feel targeted. Real kids lose real services. And the systems that enabled all of it still running, still writing checks. 14th question, if nothing structurally changes, why wouldn't this happen again? There is one final question left. When 9 billion vanishes and the response is, we had no idea, or we've been investigating for years, which answer is worse? If they didn't know, the system is too broken to function. If they did know and did nothing, the system is functioning exactly as intended. Either way, here is what's true. The people running these programs aren't stupid. They're educated, credentialed. They write reports, attend meetings, pass audits. So maybe the question isn't, how did this happen? Maybe the question is, what did they think was going to happen? That's a wrap for today, my friends. Think for yourself, rise above the noise, and see you next week.